Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Tamara, which I always have my coffee. I don't understand people who stop drinking coffee at like 3 p.m. To me, that's just round like 10. I don't get it. But I'm glad you're here. As you know, I love to interview people who have been out there doing things and shaking things up and really have something to say based on experience and not just platitudes. And I think today is 100% no exception of that. So I'm really excited about today's guest. Before I jump in and introduce her, I just want to say to everybody out there, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. It's the community that makes it. So if you're watching live and you have a question, put it in the chat bar. Here's the thing that's funny about questions, because I think sometimes we're afraid to ask them, and not just in this setting, but in a lot of settings, which is if you have that question, somebody else has it too. So you asking it actually helps everybody else. So don't forget that, or sharing your brilliance and wisdom, same thing. You could turn a light bulb on for someone else as well. So, okay, with that said, let me get to my guest, Penny Zenker, who I'm so excited to see you today, Penny. Welcome. So Penny she's a tech entrepreneur. She's been a CEO, but most importantly, she's a focusologist. And I'm going to let her say a few words to say hi, and then we're going to dig right in because you can tell by my little notes, I have a lot of questions. So Penny, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, Tamara, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to have this chat here.
Oh, we're gonna chat. We're gonna dig in with our coffee. So I want to get into what a focusologist is, but before I do that, I want to back up because as I do before I say yes to any guest, I do a ton of research. And there were a couple things that you said that really stood out to me and made me go, oh, I need to ask Penny more about this. And I think my audience will absolutely love it, which I know they will. But here's the first one, because this, do you know, Penny, you know how sometimes you have one of those moments where you hear somebody say something and it just makes you go, oh, like that is exactly how I feel. Mm-hmm. You said that you wrote your first book because of this tug of war with time. But then you went on to say, really, we're in a tug of war with time, with health, with values, with how we live our lives. Can you just talk about that? What is this tug of war you're talking about?
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to figure out, because it was an expression. With my first book, I wrote it in 2015, and I used that expression, stop the tug of war with time. And during the pandemic, I was like, we don't just have a tug of war with time. Like you said, our health, our relationships, our finance, and even our values and principles. So I had to look it up because it's an expression that we often use, but sometimes we use these expressions without understanding exactly the nuance. And do you know what the definition is?
I don't.
So it blew me away because of how obvious it was. It's a struggle for control. Mm-hmm. And then like you said, it just like sometimes makes it so clear, like that is our main issue in every area of our life, is that we're trying to control things that we can't, and often at the expense of the things that we can.
So how do you know when you're in a tug of war with, let's start easy. Well, I think more tactical, like with your time or your priorities or your energy. How do you even know when you're in that tug of war versus just, I don't know, a busy phase of life?
I would say is that it's when stress levels are high, because you can have a lot to do and be energized and be like, oh my God, yeah, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And, and I'm getting on to the next thing. But when you start to feel like really high levels of stress, you feel exhausted, because having a lot to do can also energize you if they're the right things and you've got purpose behind it. And you can be creative. It's when your creativity drops. It's when you feel stressed and out of control, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. And I was going to add to that too. I think that because I experienced this just recently with that tug of war, I think that's why I spoke to you so much when I heard you say it from one of your keynotes, is I feel unclear, I guess, is the way to say it. Because I can't, like I was doing, this happened to me the other day. I was doing a to-do list. I'm about to take this trip. I needed to get a bunch of stuff done, but I couldn't even figure out where to start my to-do list, because I felt like I was in this tug of war of everything. Like everything has to get done. I've got a deadline of this plane trip. I'm getting on that plane at a certain time and I will not be able to work when I get there. So, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't feel energized. And then on the flip side to that, just this morning, I had this opportunity for someone to accomplish something, to purchase something from our site. And I needed to finish some stuff up. And I swear in the hour, I was in the zone, getting the videos done, knowing exactly what to say. But if you had put me in that position a week ago, I would have been spinning.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's because, it's because we don't have that clarity on what's most important. And because we just keep going. What I talk about, and I talk about more in my upcoming book than my first book, but it's in these, we have to take what I call these reset moments so that we don't just keep going and keep pushing. And because that's when we experience the stress, that's when, we start to feel out of control and start to have this tug of war, because we get a lack of clarity as to what is it we're working towards again? What is that most important thing? Because we get caught up in the busy. And so, right. And you just had somebody gave you clarity. They're buying you're like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. Right. Yeah. So and we just need to take more of those moments to lock in what's most important. Even if we're starting like a new time block, how many times, and, do you actually take the first 5 minutes to get clear on what's the objective for that time block for this hour? What's my deliverable? What am I going to work on? What's most important, right? Am I going to shut everything down and block out all the distractions that could happen? If you just took 5 minutes to prime yourself, get in the right, frame of mind, the right energy. And that's all it takes, but we don't do that. We just, in everything in life, if we're solving a problem, we just get started and we don't stop to think about the options, right? And so not taking that sort of reset moment is what costs us.
So before, I want to dig into the reset moments too. Before we dig into that, will you talk a little bit about being tug of war with your values? Because I find that that's the part, at least for me personally, that's the part that really eats at me. If I do or say something that isn't in line, it happened to me a couple months ago where I said something and behaved in a way that in truth, I just didn't love. And I knew it, right? I knew it in that minute. And then I was in this tug of war, and do you know that moment where your eyes get a little fuzzy, you start sweating a little bit, because you did something, and even if nobody else around you noticed, Right. And I don't know if that's what you're talking about with values, but when I heard you say that, it's what I was reminded of, my values to be this way, and I behaved in the other way. And I circled back and I apologized. I did the things to put myself back in alignment. But I think values are an interesting one because it's something that I think a lot of people struggle to figure out who they are, what they're about, and then how to live it. But we know when we're not living it.
Yeah. So where do how do I address that? So I think that a lot of people aren't aware of what their values really are, what they want their values to be. So spending some time getting clear on that. And then, people say, oh, I value my health. And then, they eat terribly and they don't sleep the way that that they need to sleep. They're always cutting back on sleep or binging that show or doing other things, right? That impulsively, because to live our values, we have to be very intentional. And I hate to keep coming back to reset moments, but it's the reset moments that keep us in alignment and intentional. But I think there's reasons why we don't live our values, right? And also getting to understand what those reasons are also important. It's creating that heightened awareness as to, okay, I'm clear on what my values are. And am I breaking it once? And is it okay, I value family, but I have to work late this evening and it's an isolated situation? Or is it something that we're continually breaking our value, and it's going to lead to other consequences? It makes us feel, like you said, it makes us feel yucky. So how can we, like you did, because often that doesn't happen, is recognize it sooner, even if it already just happened and you said something that's out of character. Apologize. As soon as you recognize it, correct it, right? That's the opportunity. And a lot of people don't do that. And maybe even declare why.
So I have to say, this is so good, Penny. And if I were to sum up what we're just talking about, you said intention a few times, but it goes beyond. It's what's my intention for this meeting? What's my intention for this hour? What's my intention for this project? What's my intention for this life? Like you could take that idea and just, I hope the listeners just take it and put it across everything, because I think that's how you get out of, a little bit how you get out of the tug of war. But let's take it to that place, because I would say that a lot of people are probably feeling, and I know I've been here, that tug of war is really hard to get out of, especially if you're overwhelmed, overworked, right? You're underwater in some way or another. So you talk about these reset moments. Let's dig really deep into that. First of all, how did you figure this out? And second, what the hell do I do?
Well, first I want to say, I don't think it's hard. When I think we have to stop telling ourselves that it's hard to get out of it when we're overwhelmed, or it's hard to move past difficult situations. There are simple solutions. They're just not easy. Right. And so just that little frame of language, right, can make it just that much easier.
Wait, before you go on, I just want to say that's really profound, and I hope everyone really hears that. I think you're right. As you were saying that, I was thinking, what a BS narrative to keep telling myself. And simple versus easy is like a push-up, right? A push-up's, it's a simple exercise, right? You get down the ground, you get back up. That's all it is. But it's not always easy, but it is simple. If I got that right. Did I turn
what a great analogy, because at first it might be hard to do one, or it might be challenging to do that one simple push-up, but it's crazy because once you do it and you keep doing it, so let's say you do one push-up for 1 week, you find that you're able to do 2 the next week, or even 3 based on the one that you did consistently. So it builds strength over time. And to link that back to the intention and the reset moment, is that's the whole idea of the reset moment, is it's practice it in the smaller moments when we need to find our intention, when we need to realign with our goals, our values, and our intentions. And then the more that we practice it in those smaller moments, the more we've built up that muscle that we can access it when and where we need it. And like you said, maybe it's not discover it after it happened, but actually avoid it before it even happens. But that only comes with practice.
So give me some real world examples of what a reset moment might look like.
I mean, it can look like a lot of different things you're already doing. But the key that we'll come back to is what happens in that moment and how to leverage the whole practice. But a reset moment can be, some people meditate. That's a reset moment, right? And they meditate through their breathing to help them be more mentally focused throughout the day, right? So that's a reset moment. If you read scriptures, that's a reset moment. If you have a song or set an intention for the day and you say, here's my word of the day. It's today I want to be, I want to have clarity because I've been lacking clarity. So today I want to have clarity. So that's a reset moment, right? Is getting clear on what's important for you today. Maybe it's, I want to rest today because I'm tired physically and emotionally, and I need to recharge. So, but it could also be, like I said, taking that 5 minutes before you start a block to identify what's the deliverable that I'm going to do in this 1 hour. What am I going to complete?
How do you know it seems like there's 2 ways to use a reset moment. So one is in the moment when you need to get out of the tug of war. And another one is, I think, more proactive in terms of setting yourself up for success.
Yes, I call them timeouts and check-ins, right? So anytime you need a timeout, like you just said something and it triggered me, I need a timeout before I respond so that I can be more intentional in my response. But then there's the check-ins. Like you said, those are more proactive. Those are planned. I can have more control over those to make a better transition or avoid a trigger altogether, take myself, protect my environment or something like that.
So I meditate. That's my reset. And I'll do it randomly through the day, especially if I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'll go take 10 minutes. And I will tell you that I found it hard in the beginning because I'm also very type A. So the idea of spending, I don't know, 30 minutes total of my day breathing was like, oh, that's not productive time. That's not helpful, right? I'm not doing anything. I say that in air quotes.
Right.
How do you think about those moments and why they set you up for success later?
Well, there's so many different reasons, but let's start with the stress reason, is that stress compounds throughout the day. And so when we go from meeting to meeting or conversation to conversation, thing to thing, idea to idea, is we're actually compounding the stress. Even if it's positive, right, and energetic, we need a chance to release and to let go so that we can begin again, so that we can look at something with fresh eyes, so that we can have a more dynamic ability in the moment, right? Because the more stress we have, the more limited we are in our range of thinking and our flexibility. So that's, I think, the number one thing is to stop that compounding stress. And there are studies that actually prove that to be true.
I talk about it as mental residue that you build up over the day when you go from, like you said, exactly how you said it, from meeting to meeting, to task to this, to that. Like we just never clear out what's happening in our brains. And then we just go on to the next thing, and we've got all these open tabs all across our brain. So how do you use reset moments for that?
So exactly as you said, just to clear out those open loops and that, energy residues, to close one thing, close those loops. At the end, take 5 minutes at the beginning of a task and 5 minutes at the end. So plan yourself better, in that even when we schedule meetings, why are we still scheduling 60-minute meetings?
Good question. I'm in the 50-20 model, by the way, at my organization. We do 50 minutes or we do 20 minutes because you don't need it. You just fill what you got.
Yeah. Parkinson's law tells us we'll use whatever is allotted, and also you'll be more effective because you'll plan it better. You'll have your agenda points so that you can get through in that time frame, and it'll give everyone 10 minutes to go to the bathroom, to recharge, to do the things that they need to do, to write down their tasks and ideas, and then close that loop so that they can then open another loop. So, I do different things. You may have seen when we first got on is that I was smelling lavender. Or lemon.
Yeah.
So I'll also use my senses to just clear it out, right? And that can be that simple as a few deep breaths, like you said, 2 to 5 deep breaths in can change, right, your whole nervous system. Same thing with essential oils. There's so many little things that we can do that only take like 60 seconds.
So let's talk a little bit about your book. Will you hold it up? I know you had it a second ago, and we'll put
Shameless plug.
Yeah, well, we'll put it in the show notes, and we'll do all that later. But it's called the Reset Mindset, right?
Reset Mindset.
All right. What do you think? So you have to figure out how to ask this because it's kind of percolating in my head as I'm saying it. But what do you think it takes to be willing to be that person to engage in resets? And like you were kind of saying about meeting to meeting, to task, and I think that's true in life, whether that's at work or at home, we do the same thing. And then it just compounds through the entire day. What is that mindset that it takes to say, you know what, I'm going to focus on making resets a part of my life versus only when I'm extremely triggered and I'm, seeing red and I'm responding from my primal brain. I mean, we all have those moments, but I get the sense from you that the power of the reset is in the everyday stuff too.
Exactly. It's both, right? It could be like these big things like a death in the family or an illness, things. It can be a paradigm shift from a big shakeup in our lives, but it can also be in those small day-to-day things. And so I like what you said. I might answer it a little bit differently than you thought, but you had said, who do you need to be? Like what kind of person or what kind of mindset? And the first thing that came to my mind was you need to be somebody who cares about achievement, for instance, because you want to grow and get to your result faster. Then this reset mindset puts you in a mindset of dynamic reassessment, which is what we need today as things are constantly changing. So if you're an achiever, this is a mindset for you. If you are someone who deeply cares about other people and you want to make a difference and you want to connect with others, then this is for you, because a reset mindset helps you to approach each conversation with fresh eyes, with an assumption that we assume positive intent and we're always looking for, the best possible solution. It might be for you get where I'm going here is it's for everyone. And so sometimes we think, oh, that's only for people who have lots of problems. I don't have problems. I don't need that. I'm good. I'm productive already. I don't need this. But we all need this because change is constant and we're not staying ahead of the curve because we're also constantly still adapting from the past, or maybe somebody's engaging in best practices, right? And that's great. But maybe the best practices of today are not the best practices of the future, talking about being proactive, right?
So this is going to sound crazy, but go with me for a second here. I used to have this running joke with myself about, oh, that's just things rich people say. And what I mean by that is like, I cold plunge, I, meditate. I used to, like, as I was kind of climbing up the ladder, I used to think that is only what you said after you had money and success and you could spend the time. And what I came to realize over the years was that actually, in some ways, it's flipped. Like you need to do those. And now upon reflection, what I see is that they're the reset moments you're talking about in a lot of ways. I don't have a 3-hour morning routine, but I walk my dog every day, no matter what's going on, without podcasts, without headphones, because for me, that clears my head. And I cold plunge and I meditate. So all those things that I used to say, oh, that's just stuff rich people say. It's now everything I do. But I started doing it before I achieved success. But I think it's part of the reason I achieved success.
Yes.
So I think a lot of what you're saying, for those listening out there, if you're like, I don't have time for that, that's what's, people who already have the time do. I would argue, or I would have you look at, maybe it's a little bit flipped. Maybe there's something in exactly what Penny's talking about with these moments, whatever they are for you, that actually help us operate at a higher level every other time.
Right. Well, if it's helpful, I've been coaching people, executives, to build their businesses, double their business, triple their businesses, et cetera, for 20 years, right? So, and I myself built a business from just myself to a multi-million-dollar business and sold it to a public company. So I know what it is to say, I don't have the time.
Yeah.
But I catch myself every time I hear myself saying that because I don't have the time to do it again and do it over because I made a mistake because I was not thinking clearly. I don't have the time to backtrack and because I went 10 steps down in the wrong direction because I didn't think about the different options and the one that I chose was the first one available, but not the best one, right? And so we forget the time and the cost of not doing these things. That is actually there and happens.
I think that's very well said. And I wish I'd heard you say that 20 years ago when I used to think that's just something rich people say.
Me too.
I laugh now. I want to write a book and put that as a chapter because I laugh now about it, knowing what I know now. But it's all those things you're kind of talking about. And you're absolutely right. What we actually don't have is the time to repeat ourselves because we weren't paying attention, because we weren't fully present, because we weren't operating from a place where we were making the best decisions. And I don't know about you. I mean, it sounds like you have similar experience to me in this way, but when I was running this consulting firm, when I made bad decisions, other people were impacted too. So if I made a stressed out, burned out decision because I couldn't manage myself, other people in the company suffered from it as well. And I really had to get myself in check to realize this isn't just about me getting through my day feeling better. This was about the people I was leading and what we as a company were trying to achieve.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great point, right? It's a ripple effect of everybody, it's your health and your those decisions that are affecting your achievement, but it is affecting those around you. What came up for me as you were saying that is why do we have to learn the hard way? Like it's almost like, a badge.
Why?
Like, let me learn this the hard way instead of doing it. But I think it's because that's why it's a mindset, right? Is we have to shift the way we think because that part of ourselves is saying, you don't have the time. Just keep working, put in a few more hours. I still fight with that part of my mind.
Every day.
I still make the mistake sometimes where I'm not listening. I'm not paying attention, right? I'm not saying that I'm the best in the, at this focus thing. That's why I call myself a focusologist. Is I'm committed to relearn and recommit to focus, but I know that it's a challenge. And so it's a daily practice.
Do you I'm a big fan of every hour or 90 minutes, I try to get up from my desk and just do one of the I didn't call them that before, so thank you for giving me language around it. But one of those moments, right? Whether it's go pet my dog, meditate. So for me, cleaning is very cathartic, so I'll clean. My family all loves it because I'm neurotic about it. But like all those things, but even when I'm working through my day, especially because like many of us now, I work mostly from home unless I'm traveling. So, but I find that if I break my day up constantly, just knowing that that's coming, I'm more productive and more innovative when I need to be. But then I spend those time doing those other little things through my day and I come back. So I schedule it. I'm just curious if you schedule it or how you think about making sure you don't suddenly find yourself at 5 o'clock white knuckling at your computer.
I schedule it as well. And I'm in a challenging phase right now because I've overcommitted myself in some ways. So, so I look for pockets to decommit. Right. So what's not essential? What can I take off my calendar so that I can have that space? Because when I see a day that's meeting to meeting to meeting, then I'm looking for those pockets. So I look first thing in the morning to see where can I take those? And of course, I have a dog too. And that helps me tremendously because she forces me to take those breaks and will bark. And instead of resisting it and getting upset, I go, okay, let's go.
Yeah. Even a 5-minute walk for the dog. I mean, the dog doesn't have a sense of time. So we got a great question, if any, that I want to ask from Sally, which is, how do I decommit if I don't have a leadership role? I'm junior. So great question. And I know I struggled with that because I was always pretty good about protecting my time. But, when I was an account coordinator, it was a lot harder than when I was the vice president.
For sure. And I think also we have a lot of assumptions. That's one of the things that needs to happen sometimes in these reset moments is to challenge our assumptions, that we can't go to our boss and say, hey, there's a meeting at 11. I'm not really sure that I need to be at that meeting, right? Is how can we get out of meetings that we shouldn't be in the first place, right? So if there is something on your calendar where it's a nice to have, but you'd be just fine with the meeting notes, ask for that, negotiate. Hey, I've got this on my plate today. I know this is important to us as a team. Any chance I could just get the meeting notes for that meeting so that I can focus on XYZ. More often than not, right? We're just not asking for grace where we need it.
Well, and I think the key is what you just said, which is so that I can focus on XYZ. And I think if you're the leader, the manager, and, I come to you and I say, Penny, I don't know if I need to be in this meeting. I think maybe my time is better spent focusing on this initiative that's really important to us. Yeah. Whatever it is, I think that is a great way to articulate that to someone that's not just, I don't want to be at that meeting, because that's not okay. Right. That doesn't clarify your position of why you think your time is better served somewhere else.
Right. You have to communicate. Right. Yeah. So it's also, let's say that you've got something scheduled and you've got different deliverables that you have to do. Maybe you could go back to somebody and ask them, could this deliverable be split up into 2? I see 2 distinct things. I could deliver this today. Could I deliver this tomorrow? Because
that's great advice.
I also have this on my table. I learned that as a consultant. Yeah. I used to think that I took everything on and had to be done tomorrow. And I learned to ask better questions and to renegotiate where necessary. And if the answer is no, we really need that, or we need both of those things done, is there anyone else that might be able to support me? Like, what kind of questions can you ask? And then if there's nothing, then I suggest to step back and say, am I doing this the most effective way? Is there another way that I could get both of these things done because sometimes we get caught in the resistance of things.
Yeah.
Of this sucks, this isn't fair, all of that. And of course, we waste all that time and energy in that resistance,
Doing nothing.
As opposed to thinking, okay, well, how else can I approach this?
So you are just, I don't want it to go by quickly because what you said is so important, which is asking the questions. I think we come from similar backgrounds, but I do a lot of consulting and fractional innovation officer roles. And one of the things I've really learned, not just in innovation itself, but in that services role, is the importance of asking questions. And what I found, and I think you were kind of alluding to this, so I don't want to go by it quickly, I want the audience to really hear it, is also when you ask those questions, not only do you get to kind of rearrange things on your plate to make it better, but also I think you help the person on the other side of the table get clarity that they may not even have. They may just say, I need this deliverable Friday because that's what they're trained to say and do and how they were trained. But it turns out they don't actually need it Friday. In fact, they don't need it at all. It turns out what they actually need is this, and they need it 2 months from now. So, yeah. but a lot of us don't have clarity. So those questions help you, I think, get prioritized, but also helps the person on the other side get clear too. Like, don't assume they're clear.
100%. As a matter of fact, if you did nothing but ask questions as reset moments, it helps you because a reset moment is a purposeful pause to stop and rethink, reconnect, be intentional, right? So if you have a question that you can ask yourself, that's a reset moment for you to help to focus you in solve a problem or get more clarity or be more directed in what matters most. But it's also, as you said, it's for others too. The question that you're asking yourself, but if you're in a leadership role, don't fix their problem.
Yeah.
Create a reset moment for them to think about how they can best approach it. Ask them a question. It can also be a directed question. That's the good thing about questions is we might be asking a bad question that has us focused here. So ask a question that kind of shifts somebody's head that goes, oh, let me answer that question, right?
One of my favorite things to do is to ask a lot of different questions about the same thing, because you never know which lane is the lane that's going to take you to the right place. And questions in is answers out. Always. But I really like what you just said. In fact, I had a guest on a little while back, David Marquette. He's Marquet, sorry. He was the commander, naval officer of a nuclear submarine. And one of the things that he really talks about is creating creating leaders, not mindless followers. And I think when you become the leader that doesn't allow reset moments for your team, you turn them into followers. And then you get frustrated because your team can't do creative problem solving and figure it out on their own. They push all their problems up, but you've actually accidentally created it for your team.
Absolutely. I think as a leader, reset moments and a reset mindset is a leadership tool. Right? So whether it's self-leadership or leading others, because you're building other leaders when you teach them how to reset. And actually, there are a lot of different ways, right, that you can teach them. And in the book, I talk about 3 steps. What actually happens in a reset moment to create the reset is how we build those other leaders and how we create that critical thinking and creative thinking or team thinking or just to get us with fresh eyes looking at things.
So you had mentioned asking yourself a question can be a reset moment. Do you have a favorite question?
One of the questions that is what's the best use of my time right here? What's the 20% that's going to get me 80% of the difference? Like I'm always trying to live that 80-20 rule in every area, no matter what it is. If it's my relationship with my kids, what do we need? What's the 20% that we need to be better connected or, whatever it is I'm looking to achieve.
Okay. So you just transitioned exactly into my next question, which I looked for something in my house today because I'm a child of the 80s and I did not find it, but you talk about the Rubik's Cube. And do you have one handy? I
have lots of them.
Yeah. I was so bummed I couldn't find it.
I have lots of them.
So, but you talk about it in the sense of like, focusing on the things that actually move you forward, the things that matter. So I don't want to give the farm away because I watched all the videos of you talking about it, but will you talk about the Rubik's Cube? I have not just kind of a child of the 80s, but because when you said it, I was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly how it is.
Well, It's interesting. And I was looking for, well, first of all, I use the Rubik's Cube in all of my talks, no matter whether I'm talking about communication, or I'm talking about innovation, or I'm talking about resilience. So, I first of all, we love the cube, right? We love these puzzles. And it's like, everybody is like, oh, wow, this is an impossible puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Most people just look at it and are like, and me too. Like, and I'm the type of person that, in aerobics, everybody's going this way and I'm still going this way from the last move. Like it takes me a minute to catch up and then they're off to the next thing. So a complex puzzle like this to me is like ridiculously challenging. So I'll come back to why I use it for all different means, but you can actually solve this cube in just a few moves done over and over again. And that fascinated me. And that's the perfect metaphor for the complexity of our lives, is that we think that everything is so complex, and we do tend to make things more complex.
Mm-hmm.
We add versus subtract things in our lives. And so it's just coming down to what simple moves or what simple questions do we need to do and ask ourselves over and over again so that we can get clarity, so we can take back control, so that we can focus on what matters most. And so that's what I use this metaphor for.
Yeah.
First and foremost is that we can reduce the complexity in that way with 3 simple steps.
So there's 2 things in here that I really want people to hear. One is we make things more complex than they need to be. And 100% agree. I think we are so good at taking something that could be a straight line and making this a mess ball of yarn that like looks very yeah, exactly like that Rubik's Cube.
This is what we do.
But the other thing you said right there that I want to ask more about is you said it's like a couple moves, right? Repeated over time that get you there, or consistently. How do you, in your experience, how have you figured out what those moves are? And I'm asking because I sometimes, there's kind of a couple reasons. One is sometimes I feel like the moves are right there, but we don't always see the results right away. So we give up too quickly. Or I have seen several colleagues that I know make the wrong moves repeatedly over time. And I've probably done that too.
Right. And I probably have too. So I think also it's like, it's a way of thinking, right? It's a meta model, a way of thinking that a lot of different frameworks and other meta models can fit in.
Yeah.
And so whenever how did I find this? Well, I realized that I've been, when we come back to reset moments, that I've been triggering this practice with these reset moments ever since I was 19. And that's when my father died in an accident. And I think we have all these great practices that we've gained over our lifetime that we don't mine. We don't necessarily unpack it to understand what we're really doing. And so, I've been taking the time to unpack it and to understand that I have been resetting. I have been dynamically reassessing. And that's kind of like been a common piece in my life. And the resetting is basically 3 simple steps. And you're going to say, this is ridiculously simple. And it is. It's step back, right? Step back away from the emotion, from the bias, the way we've always done it, the way we're currently looking at it, and get some perspective. Again, if we're in the cube, it's easy to get caught up, right? The closer I get, we're caught up and all we see is green. We're caught in one perspective. So we have to step back away from it. And now we can tilt it, turn it, twist it, right? We can see all the different sides so that we can step into some of these perspectives and say, well, what would happen? Why is this person thinking that way? Well, let me step into their shoes. Or why is the market behaviors changing the way they are? Well, let me step in and analyze and take some more, maybe I need to do a survey, right? So what are the tools that help us to get perspective? And then we realign is the third item. Like, duh, but sometimes, right? I think it was Mark Twain who said, I would write a shorter letter if I had more time.
Exactly.
It takes something to simplify something so that we can understand it, so that we can consistently use it. And so that's it, is that I realize that's what I help whenever I'm coaching somebody, all the tools that I use, do this, step back away from it for a moment. Let's take inventory and get clear what works, what doesn't, where are we now? Where do we want to go? Right. They're obvious, but we just need to make it more intentional that we're stepping through all the steps, because we tend to go, oh, I'm aware now, I'm good. And then we continue to do the same thing, even though we're aware, but we don't really get perspective. We don't really open up to new options. We don't, and then we don't realign around the best next step.
Well, okay. I have so many questions right now. Okay. So first of all, let's go to the first step about taking a step back and kind of really looking at things. I personally tend to be a little bit extreme in my way of doing that, and it works for me. Like, I tend to do 3-4 day backpacking with no phone, no cell, no nothing by myself. Or I'm in Colorado, so I'll go hike a 14er, right? Like, in fact, I'm doing that on Sunday. But because for me, that really works. Or I'll train for a competition, or like, it's crazy stuff like that. When you see it, though, implemented really well on a day-to-day basis, or maybe not day-to-day, maybe it's even big stuff too, like my business is heading in the wrong direction. I gotta really think about it, right?
Stuff.
Yeah. How do you think about taking that step back and taking that inventory? Or I guess another way to look at this as, what have you seen work for people who have engaged in this?
Well, I mean, it all works. It's kind of like, you need a time management app.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my God, there's time management productivity apps. There's 5,000 of them. Which one works? They all work.
Yeah.
When we use it consistently.
Right. When we do it.
But most people, they take an app, they kind of only partially do it. And then they go, this doesn't work. I'm going to get another app. Or that must be better. So I'm going to go with that app.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I have 20 apps that I'm using simultaneously, which might be wasting my time. So there are so many different, like I said, this is a meta model, like an overarching way of thinking. So many of the tools work. It depends on the circumstance. So like you said, it's not just to recharge. So that's one thing. So you have to find what helps you recharge. For you, you take that day off, you go for a hike, it clears your head. You're able to maybe approach the week in a different way. But what about when your business is facing a serious problem? How do you take inventory then? How do you get perspective then? And then the tools that you use are different. So do you take a SWOT analysis and say, okay, well, let me look at my company's strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. And then the question is, well, how do you do that? What questions are you asking in each quadrant that help you to really get perspective on where's the market headed? Who is my target customer and how has their behavior changed and how will it change in 10 years? Are you asking those questions, right? How might I approach this differently because the way I'm doing it doesn't work? So the questions that we ask may change, but it's still the overarching, I've got to step away from this. And how you do that depends on your circumstance. Does that make sense? And
yeah. And I was thinking a couple of things, but one is I was thinking about 2020 for a minute, which I know now seems like forever ago, but like you, I do a lot of keynote speaking. So I'm in that world a lot with a lot of those people who do speaking and event-based. And there was a moment there where one of two things happened. Either you were scrambling or you were doing exactly what you just said, and taking a step back and saying, what's coming? What's my business model? Is this the right business model for the big shift we've just seen? And I found that over time, the ones that scrambled are still scrambling. And the ones that actually took a step back, figured out their 3 Rubik's Cube moves and adjusted, did a reset, are actually the ones who are doing well today, because the business fundamentally shifted and was not going back. But some people chose to stay on the hamster wheel and how they approached it. And some chose to take that to what you're saying, reset, and go, I need to take a step back. I need to look and I need to assess, and then I need to reset and I need to realign. But those were 2 different approaches that I saw, and I see it all the time, but I think that was at a macro level.
Absolutely. Right. And I, in the book, I talk about a comparison with the growth mindset, building off of Carol Dweck's work. The fixed mindset approached the 2020, right, and the changes, and said, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing that I can do. So I'm just going to sit and wait. And so they did nothing.
Yeah.
And they didn't grow and they didn't really expand themselves. Maybe they did a little networking. Who knows? But
I think they did some
limited,
webinars.
Maybe they did some webinars. I mean, that's already advanced, right? There are
Yeah.
people who did nothing and they were waiting for
Mhm.
things to change back. They're waiting. And then there were those that took a minimum amount of, okay, here's what I can do. I'll do some webinars. I'll rechange. I'll do some, I'll do my same presentation live on
Virtually in some way. Yeah.
But then there were those who were like, okay, this is an opportunity, right? So that's the fixed mindset. The growth mindset is learning and saying, oh, okay, I've learned I can do this online. That works. I'm going to continue to do it online. But the reset mindset, it keeps reassessing. So first it went, okay, I can do this online, and I start to do some online things and I start to network and open up new doors. And then I go, the technology here is super cool. I can use things that'll flash in the background. I can really add music. I can create a whole ambiance online.
Yeah.
And so they're going with it, right? Then they're finding new avenues and opportunities. Hey, I can do this in this way. And all of a sudden their business is growing. Like my speaking business actually took off in the pandemic, like more so than it had before, because it forced me, right? These things can be catalysts. A reset mindset takes a limitation and makes it a catalyst so that we can be more creative. And the key is not only taking a limitation like 2020, but how do we create these limitations for ourselves? Create little fun, creative projects that says, well, what if I only worked half of a work week? So we could do that, right? I get it that not everybody could do that. But what if I said, I'm only going to work 20 hours a week? What do I need to change in my business so I'm still making the same amount of money? What could I do differently? Now my creative, right, reset mindset starts to go, okay, well, what does that look like? What could I do? I could do, so that's the kind of thing. And it's the same thing with how we approach whatever it is in our business. Go do that for yourself. If you're working for a larger organization, maybe you can optimize a process that is time consuming. If you just ask yourself, what wastes the most time in my day-to-day, and get creative to find ways to eliminate that or reduce that. And if it's organization wide that is the cause, how can you be a part of making that change?
It's so funny. The other day I heard, do you know who Alex Hormozy is?
I'm not familiar.
A big entrepreneur guy. And he built a whole gym. I don't know, it was in the gym world. And then he has something called acquisition.com. So he invests in businesses. And so I heard him, he was on an interview, and he said that when he was building his business, even today, he orders in dinner because for him, making dinner is a waste of his time for him, right? He's not over there trying to feed a family and create connection in the kitchen. So that's not what he's doing. And I remember being appalled, and I've been like, oh my God, what a waste of money. That's horrible. Like, just all this resistance came up in me. And then I found myself, when I should have been focusing on some work stuff that needed to get done, that was an opportunity, I'm over there making dinner. And I was so frustrated. I started laughing because I was like, oh my God, Alex was right. Like, you got to find those things. And I'm not saying it's cooking dinner for your family. I'm just saying, like, we all have these things in our day, both work and I think also personal, that we think of as just frustrations we have to put up with. But what I love about what you're saying there is maybe those are the places we can reassess a little bit and say, well, maybe it's not supposed to be this way. Maybe it's supposed to be a different way, or maybe it could be a different way.
Yeah. And where can we let go of things we're trying to control? So let's talk about the way
Back to tug of war.
My kids, right? My kids are teenagers. They leave their stuff everywhere. I can tell them 100 times that they need to put their stuff away. They need to, and they're good kids. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I have teenage boys. I get it.
Right. And it gets worse. I don't know what it is. It's like that senior year, the junior, senior year, like catastrophe. My daughter just ended her senior year, and this past year, I don't know what happened. She became like a total slob. But the point is that you were saying like things like I could constantly clean the house and clean the stuff that they've been doing, or otherwise what I've set for myself is I want one counter that's clean. Like I can then look at that counter and know there's peace, right?
Yeah.
The rest, I just let it go.
Whatever.
I shut their door. I don't care what their room looks like. I just shut it. I don't want to look. They have to live in it, not me. So I think we also very much so. I think it's more so than anything coming back full circle to the tug of war.
Yeah.
If we want to have a reset mindset, one of the key items is permission to let go, permission to forgive, permission to, okay, you made a mistake. Don't beat yourself up over it. What did you learn about it? What can you change? How can you move forward? And just keep growing and letting go, right? If you can't control it, what can you control? Focus on that. And that relieves a huge amount of stress.
Huge.
Huge.
I definitely struggle with that in everything in work and in personal of wanting to control it all. That's why I think the tug of war spoke to me so much, because I want the whole house to be clean. I don't want their socks to be shoved into the couch cushions. I don't understand why they're there. So, but I want their rooms to be.
In case they need to put them on when.
I don't understand. I don't understand why their rooms look so disgusting, but I've also learned to just close the door. That's their problem. And every now and again, I'm like, look, you need to clean your room. This is not like, we can't keep it like this. We need to vacuum. I need to see the floor. But it's like,
I don't care what kind of pigsty they live in. That's what
I can't get there yet. I'm not there yet. I'm every 3 months. I'm like, we need to clean this room, but they have to do it. I don't go in there. I don't want to know. But that letting go is hard. And I guess the advice I'd love to hear from you is, so I love the process that you're talking about, this reset mindset. And I love the simplicity of it, because I do believe there's power in simplicity. And it's complexity that causes stress. I think it causes outcomes that don't actually serve us because we make it so complex. And normally when you strip stuff away, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple, right? A fine fusion dinner is just 5 ingredients thrown together in a different way. Like it's pretty simple. What advice do you have for people who are listening and thinking, yes? And the reality is a lot of us don't know how to get off the hamster wheel. It's uncomfortable to take a breath because we're not used to it. So how do you help people? How do you think about helping people transition through the uncomfortable part of trying this out? And maybe I'm assuming it's uncomfortable. I see a lot of people.
What's uncomfortable about it? What's uncomfortable about it? I think that I
think it's habitual. And I think that we are trained in routines in our brain that we get stuck in. It's kind of like looking at a path across a park that the grass no longer grows, right? But in our brains. And even if it doesn't serve us, right, that path is there because we're so used to it. So I am, not me personally, but just kind of saying, like, I'm used to being stressed out, too much to do. Maybe I thrive on a little drama because that's what I know.
Right.
And I want the benefits of everything you're saying, but there's a transition. There's a transition.
You have to want it, right? Unfortunately, why do people finally make a change when they've hit a certain weight and they're in clothes that don't fit anymore and it's upsetting, and then they make a change? So I just hope that it doesn't lead to a heart attack or a divorce or your kid's not talking to you anymore, any terrible thing because you're not willing. And I don't mean you. I mean, anybody who's listening, right? So Tony Robbins, I used to be a Tony Robbins coach, and he has a process, it's called the Dickens process. If you have to, think about the worst possible thing that could happen if you do not change in your life and what costs are associated with that. Because we go 10 times faster away from pain than towards pleasure. So I can tell you it's going to make your life better. And you're like, but if you right now knew that if you didn't change, you were going to have a heart attack, then you probably would change. Or some people, like, that smoking is bad. They still smoke.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it doesn't matter. It won't happen to me. So there has to be a connection. You have to find the reason why this is going to motivate you or be valuable to you, right? So that's got to come first, is you've got to want to change, and you've got to have a big enough why to do it, to overcome the not doing it. But I would say start small, like anything. It's being stressed is habitual. So add in just these little things. If you're not a meditator, don't meditate, right? Just add back the transitions that are lost in our life. Just take a transition in the morning. Just don't check your phone. I got it.
Okay, I'm ready.
That's too big of a move. So just add back the transition in the morning so that you set an intention for your day, let's say, something small. And at the end of your workday and in between each segment of work, just get something like this in between, like your essential oils, and take a sniff. Just habitually put a few breaks in there, right?
I love that. And I just want to say for anyone listening, I'm not some master like manifestor meditator. Like I go onto YouTube and just find 10-minute guided meditations. And I am known to fall asleep during them often. So I don't think it has to be complicated. I don't think you have to become some transcendental meditator to do that. Or like you were saying, Penny, like grab some lavender oil from the grocery store. It's not hard.
Mm-hmm. I have an idea.
Okay,
so the time that you think you don't have the time, and this is what I started to do, because like I'm in a funk right now. So I'll be totally honest, right? So every time I hear my language slip and I hear myself say, I don't have the time to take a break, or, you know, feel myself spinning my wheels, that's exactly the time that you need to take the break. So let yourself be triggered into the break. Maybe that's the best first start, is when you feel the overwhelm, you feel chaotic. That's the time you must. It's not a should. In that moment, you must.
Yeah. I heard someone say best once, I'm going to botch it, but it was basically, if you can master this when you're busy, think how easy it'll be when you're not. Because I think we wait for the stars to be in alignment of, once I get through this project, then I'll start my reset mindset, because I'll have more time. Where, oh my gosh, like to your point, if you can do it now, and you can, that's what I hear you saying, right? You can. I know you can.
You can and you must.
You can, then you absolutely will later too.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add, you said something else that I wanted to just, we kind of talked about it, but I just want to say it out loud because I thought it was, the way you said it was so great. And it was that it's not the complexity of the problem, it's the simplicity we approach it and how we approach it. Yep. Will you just, I want to just hear a little bit of depth behind that, because it's been peppered through this conversation about how complex we make things or how hard we make things. And you've caught me a few times saying like, well, that has to be hard, when it doesn't have to be hard. Talk a little bit about that and why we do it and how we get out of that cycle of overcomplicating so many things in our work and life. Every problem, it's like we try to make it so hard.
I'm not sure how to answer that other than just step back away from it.
Yeah.
Right. I think when we think it's hard, or we're not sure the answer, we don't have clarity, because our tendency is to add. Let me add one more thing. So what if our first step was to subtract? What could I remove from this situation? That's why I said I decommit. What can I remove from my calendar? What can I remove from my responsibilities so I don't feel that level of stress? So maybe that is the piece, is stepping back to look at what you can remove.
I love that. So, you know, because I'm in the space of human innovation, right? How do we as humans innovate? And I always talk about that in innovation of how do we remove the layers to find the heart of what we're trying to accomplish, or the heart of the ideas. And I like that for everyone listening. That's my challenge to all of you, is to do maybe a starting exercise of, what can I remove from my day? What can I remove from this problem? What can I remove from this task? I think, don't you find, Penny, that there's so much more to remove than you originally think?
Yeah. And I think what I like to do, because sometimes we're limited in our thinking, especially. So like, I like how you said, remove a layer. So let's add to that. What are some categories of what you could remove? You could remove a barrier, right? You could remove language that's keeping you from it, right? So I always find that's even more helpful, right? When we add some, what could we remove from our environment that's distracting? So if you create a couple of categories, it'll help you to be more effective in doing it, because it'll give structure to that reset moment. It'll give structure to stepping back and reflecting, versus it being shallow reflection. It makes it a little bit deeper.
I really want to highlight what you just said, because it was so good about what language can you remove? Because I think one of the themes I think in this conversation is like, don't make things harder than they need to be. Don't, talk yourself into these stories that don't serve you by making things harder, by making things more complicated, by making things impossible, like the Rubik's Cube. Like, it's not actually impossible. It's 3 moves done over and over again. So what's the story and the language that we use that's pushing us away from the reset moments that we need?
And what language supports us, right? So you had mentioned it earlier that I've given language to some of these pauses, and that language supports us.
So I can't believe we're out of time. Penny, what's your last words of advice for all the everyday innovators out there who are like, I am ready to have a reset mindset? Because I'm loving it.
I would say if you're ready to have a reset mindset, I'd love you to go over to the resetmindset.net. The book is available for pre-order, and you're going to be able to get your hands on an electronic copy right away. It doesn't come out until September 3rd in this hard copy, but I've got all sorts of resources for you, situational resets, and just to trigger and add more ideas and more structure for you. I'd love to have you check it out, the resetmindset.net.
I love it. And I really like that you talk about it as a mindset and not just, there's tools in there that make it applicable. But I like that it's more of a mindset. And I feel a little validated because I feel like I do some of these things without even realizing it, like the walking the dog and like all the breaks that I take. Because I've just over time realized that not only do I feel better, I do better when I implement this across my entire life. And I think for all of you listening, go get the book, go listen to Penny, and know that the other side actually feels really good once you start implementing it, and they're not hard things to implement. Well, Penny, thank you for joining me today. This whole moment was like a reset moment. I feel like I love just getting to listen and to learn new things. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.